Hi guys, this is Ben from KO Technologies, and in this video we're going to be going through some simple software options to get you out on the trails or out on the road as soon as possible so you can tweak your bike to how you like it. This is designed as a simple software guide. There is a written software guide on the website as well that you can check out that explains all of the options. If you do have any queries, problems, questions about any of the software or any of the options in the software, then you can obviously contact us at info@komoto.com or message us on facebook.com/KO Technologies, and we will reply as soon as we possibly can. So first off, as you can see from the software, I'm connected to my bike, and I just wanted to go through a few things with you which will make your life a little bit easier, will let you hopefully understand some of the software options a little bit better. So I'm going to start with controller parameters. Now, the first thing I want to say about controller parameters is the rated voltage and rated power don't really do anything to the bike, so please ignore those numbers. This software is not just software that we use for the KO Moto products, it's software that we use for other products as well. And some of these settings are used for batch tuning and kind of batch settings and processing lots of units for the same sort of bikes. Scooters, all that sort of stuff. So the only thing that you need to kind of look at is the rated voltage. This will tell you which battery that you're using, so it will be a direct representation of which hex file you have uploaded. So if you are using a 72 volt battery like I am, then it will say 72 volt here. If you're using a 60 volt, it will say 60 volt, and if you're using 84 volt, it will say 84 volt. Now, if it says the wrong thing, then potentially you have the wrong hex file uploaded. So your battery indicator, your state of charge will not work properly. So I would suggest uploading the correct hex file for the battery that you're using prior to doing these software tweaks. Okay, so the next option I'm going to be looking at is max line current. Now this is the maximum DC current in. The controller will support up to 370 amps continuous. So if you have a battery that supports that sort of level of discharge, then feel free to up it to whatever figure you are comfortable with. I believe our stock tunes are sent out at 150 amps. You'll obviously need to up this as and where you please, and depending on how much power you want to put through the system, you can go up to 370 amps for max line current. Next to maximum line current, you have maximum phase current. This can be set up to 800 amps. There is another video on throttle calibration, so I'm not going to labor this too much, but when you update to the newest software updates that we are going to be putting out, please make sure that you retain your threshold low and threshold high settings so you can change that to the new file once you've uploaded it. These will change when you receive new updates, so please make sure that you save them or you know what they are and you change that as a first port of call so your throttle is working correctly. The rest of the settings on here we would recommend leaving as is. Some of these are fairly advanced settings like PID controllers. We would suggest leaving them as they are. If you do have any queries or issues or just want to know a little bit more about them, there is a software guide which gives you a few lines about each line. So you can look at that. If you have any more questions, you can get in contact with us. The only option over here that I would suggest you changing is your low voltage protection. This is the point at which the controller will go into limp mode. So you can set the voltage to whatever you like, depending on the voltage of your battery. Obviously, most batteries have a BMS as well, so they will cut out or go into sort of low power mode once they've hit their low voltage threshold, but you can set that in the controller as well. Moving on to controller functions, there are a few functions here that I want to speak briefly about. There is obviously some more information on the guide. The first is the braking option. So this will change how braking is applied to your motor based on your selection. Float run basically will allow your motor still to spin when you pull the brakes. So Churons as standard come with brake sensors which will cut the power to the motor once you've pulled the brake. Float run will allow the motor still to run. Float stop will stop the motor when you pull the brakes. And the other option that is useful here is invalid, and invalid basically disables all of those functions. It disables the sensors completely and forces your bike basically to run off of mechanical braking only. So just like a mountain bike would be, there is no motor intervention at all with the invalid option selected. The next option I'm going to be looking at is reverse charging. Now, reverse charging is basically regen braking, and there's a few different options here. You can enable it, disable it. You can put it in brake mode, which basically starts regen braking when you pull the brakes. Bear in mind, to do this, you will have to have brake sensors connected. And then you have EABS, which basically is when you drop the throttle, regen braking will start. This is similar to how the Chiron comes as stock. So those are the settings for regen braking. Just bear in mind that regen braking is affected by these values here. This is stop back current and max back current. These are the settings used on the standard Chiron. I found personally that with our motor, these are a little bit harsh, so you may want to drop these numbers. We would not recommend using any more than 20 amps for regen braking because the feeling is quite harsh. So you need to be a little bit careful. I also wanted to add a little bit around this particular setting. This is the throttle response. This basically is how aggressive the bike feels. We would recommend using this in sport mode, and as standard, it is set to sport mode. You can use the other modes, but they are significantly slower in terms of the acceleration profile. So if you are wanting to ride fairly aggressively, you definitely want the sport mode enabled. Okay, the next couple of settings that I'm going to be talking about are mid-speed parameters and low-speed parameters. The software standard has 3 different modes, whereas obviously a normal Chiron has 2 different modes. This will directly control the mode that you're using through the Sport and EP button on your bikes. Low speed is currently not used at all, so ignore these settings completely. Mid-speed parameters will be your EP mode. So the idea of this is you can limit your max DC in, your phase current, and your maximum speed the motor will hit in terms of RPM. This will allow you to adjust the speed of your bike and the way obviously it feels in terms of acceleration and torque. So this is kind of perfect for tweaking your EP mode. If you have like a road legal mode that you want to use as EP, say you're in the EU and you're limited to 45 kilometers an hour or 28 miles an hour, you can set these settings to reduce the power and the RPM of the motor to the point where you can get it sort of bang on 28 miles an hour if you want to do that. And then you can have the sport mode freed up to go as fast as you want to go. So this mode here will limit your DC in, your phase current, and your motor RPM, and these 2 values are as a percentage. So if you type in 30 on line current, you will basically be limiting your DC amps into 30% of your original max line current. Same with a max phase current. If you pop your phase current ratio to 30, you will be running off of 30% of 400 amps or whatever you set your max phase current to be. And then finally, you have this mid speed, which is actually just motor RPM. So if you set this to say 5,000, the maximum RPM your motor will do in EP mode is 5,000 RPM. So finally, I just wanted to talk about the current coefficient section. This is one of the most important sections in the software tuning because it allows you to basically tune how aggressive the bike is and how much pull it has through the motor's RPM range. So this goes from 500 to 9,000 RPM, and what it effectively allows you to do is to limit phase current, which will affect the pull of the bike and how the bike pulls. So for example, if you were on the road and you wanted a nice easy takeoff, you might change 500 RPM to 45, 1000 RPM to 60, and then ramp up from there. You can change this value from 0 to 100 effectively, but we don't recommend changing it to anything less than 20, otherwise you will potentially have some problems. And if you set everything to 100, you may also have some potential problems with motor shudder or drivetrain shudder. What you need to do at this point is to understand that if you set everything to 100, your drivetrain on your bike may not tolerate this. So it is a case of finding a happy medium and finding what your drivetrain will tolerate. So this will require some tweaks and some tuning. You may find that you get some shudder on the motor at sort of 30 miles an hour. And if you do this, you need to drop the equivalent RPM down a little bit. We would suggest if you are getting any shudder on your motor, to drop the numbers by about 5 to 10 per area and go and test, and then basically see if you have any issues. If you have no issues, then you can tweak it further. So the idea of this whole section is that you can tweak the pull of your bike through any given RPM range that you desire, and you can have it as aggressive or as flat as you would like. So for me, the motor parameters section, the current coefficient section here, is one of the most important sections of the software tuning, because it allows you to make your bike as aggressive and pull as hard as you want it to pull through the motor's entire RPM range. Please bear in mind, obviously, that the values that you are setting here are in direct correlation to the max phase current that you've put under the control parameters. So if you have any more questions about software or tuning, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us on info@komoto.com, or you can get us on Facebook, facebook.com/KO Technologies. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.